everyone, it's Julian. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make evil sounding hard techno, particularly the melodies and the scale that you're going to use to write the same type of dark, evil sounding riffs like you hear in tracks by ShlÃ, Airod, and Alignment, as well as a ton of other people who have made tracks in this style. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available. Let's get started. Alright, the first thing that we have up here are the cymbals, which sound like this. So, the first thing you'll notice here is actually just how minimal the cymbals are. Typically in a track like this is how it's going to be set up. Like, you're really just going to use like one hi-hat, maybe a second one if you want like a type of rhythm. But really just like that one super fat hi-hat. You hear it's super mid-rangey, super punchy. So it's just going to stand out really nicely on its own. We don't even have any processing on this. We're just letting this really fat hi-hat come through, and then the ride. And the reason why you don't want to do really any more than these two layers is simply because, you know, you're going to have like these kind of rolling percussions underneath. Plus we have all that percussion which is happening just even from the kick. With the rumble. So you really don't need a whole lot. You just need that. And then the ride. And if you try to add in, you know, like a and too many hi-hats, it's just gonna get messy. Like, this style is all about keeping things really simple and clean. And it's the fact that you have like very simple arrangements of sounds, you know, a very simple combination of sounds, but then the fact that you're actually like, you know, just making each individual sound so big and so fat. That's essentially how it's going to work here. So we have the hi-hat. I'll show you the ride as well. So the ride has a little bit of stuff going on. You can see right off the bat, so we have this echo, which is on the ping pong setting. So that's what's giving it that kind of wider stereo image. And then we also have an EQ here, cutting out some low end and boosting the highs. But then also you'll notice that on the actual ride sampler here, we're actually automating the pitch. There we go, you can see that. So yeah, it's a really subtle thing. This is just one of those kind of like more like rough around the edges, sort of warehousey types of things. Like, to me, this almost reminds me of like, you know, The Bells by Jeff Mills, like one of the most classic techno tracks ever, arguably the most classic, where, you know, you just have like something that's very simple like this, like just a ride going but then that little like pitch automation. You can hear it in the track. It's so subtle because this kind of like is more of a background element, but then that little tiny thing is just going to make it feel a little bit more alive. And to me, that is techno. You know, having this super repetitive track, but because you literally just change the pitch of the ride, you know, it makes things more interesting and gives it the same movement that you would have if you had, you know, a million elements going on. And yeah, then after that we have this rolling percussion. So you can see these are just two loops. I'll play you. So here are the rolls on their own. And then that high-end percussion. So you can hear with these, you really just want like, you know, that super full, chunky, kind of like rolling. And you also notice with this one, there's a bit of call and response, because we have like, so it's like, you know, it's not enough just to have a you need the call and response there. You need that how it's like low and then high. And then for this one, it's just really adding that crunchy high end. You hear this a lot in these kinds of tracks, like Yeah, that's essentially what it is. It's like they're taking a sound that is really like just that high end, and then you're layering it with the rolls and with the rumble. And it's those things coming together that's essentially going to create that nice like percussion in the middle. And if I turn these two things off, you can hear it's missing a lot of the sort of like crunchiness and also just like groove that it had, you know? So that's those two. Then we have this little reverse sound. You can hear that every time. It's that. So all this is it's this little sample that, yeah, like I'll reverse it and show you. So yeah, it's just like this nice, almost like a ride cymbal type of percussion. And then what I've done is I've reversed that. And then you get this nice kind of into the sound. And then we just have some reverb and a high pass filter. And now this is meant to be honestly kind of similar to like what that pitch change on the ride was doing, where it's essentially like just little things that are going to come in throughout this very repetitive and simple loop that are going to, you know, not just be happening over and over and over, but like in this case it just happens once every bar, and it's going to just kind of break it up and make it feel a bit more alive and a bit more free while we're listening to the super loopy track. And if I turn this off, I think you'll notice like it still kind of works without it. It just isn't as like exciting, you know, it's not as compelling when you don't have that kind of pulling you through. So it's important to keep in mind, this is an easy layer to overlook. Like you might think you don't need something like this when you're actually making a track, but it's going to add a lot and it's not going to take up too much space. So it's pretty important to have, you know, just something like that to break it up, to not just be constantly going in every single bar. Then we have the melody. So yeah, here's the pattern. It's the same pattern in this part as it is in this part. I've just put it down an octave in that second half. So it's a little thing, but little stuff like that can be a nice way to just kind of give your lead like, you know, a bit more of like an interesting feel. Like it's not so like just that same thing the whole way through. You get that first 4 bars. And then the second 4 bars, it's literally the exact same notes, same pattern, but it just kind of is like, almost like a call and response between the high part and the low part. And in terms of the notes here, so you can see what we're doing is essentially we're using this little scale up here where you do like, you know, that's essentially the scale. All these notes down here, it's just G, so it's just an octave of that first note. But yeah, so that's the scale. That is like the thing that's being used to make a lot of these melodies. Is you have like these 2 notes are 2 semitones apart. You have a note in between, and then those 2 that are 2 semitones apart. It's a very simple scale, but that's what creates that more like evil sounding melody. And then essentially once you have that scale, you can have it in any key, but once you have that scale, you're just moving it like around and just, you know, essentially create like more catchy rhythms with that scale. You know, it's all just about how you take that and actually program it. But the thing about this scale is that it's very simple. You're just selecting 4 notes. And then you're just repeating those over and over. And I think that's really a big part of what makes these melodies, is not even so much like the actual notes that are being played, but how simple it is and how it's like very few notes. So you can only really get what these 4 notes give you. It's not like you can hear like that note. You know, that all of a sudden gives it more context. So it's like, you know, you're not even giving them that. You're just giving them these 4 notes. And essentially when you play those 4 notes over and over, it tells your brain this is an evil melody. But it's really just because you're hearing that same thing over and over, and it just kind of has that inclination. Now for the sound on this one, it's made using a wavetable, and it's actually a pretty simple sound. You know, it's just, you can see like a pretty standard super saw. We have 2 saw waves, detuned a bit. They're also an octave apart. And then I just have a low pass filter. We have the amp envelope like that. Envelope 2 is on the filter frequency, and then we just have unison. What makes this one a bit more interesting though is the fact that the second oscillator is actually 1 semitone up. So typically, you know, you would have your oscillators playing the same note essentially. Like you would have, you know, either this would be at 0 or -12 or +12, and it's always octaves of the same note, so that essentially when you play one note on the keyboard, you're playing that one note. With this, what happens is, this isn't that loud. You know, you can see you're not really even hearing it that much. But by putting that up 1 semitone, all of a sudden you add so much like musical texture to it. And I'll play you, so here's the melody with this just on the default setting. You know, it sounds evil, but it's not quite got that same like darkness to it. So that's something to keep in mind also, is that the actual sound that you're using here, that you're programming this MIDI onto, is just as important as the MIDI in this case. Because if you just have this MIDI, you are going to get the evil sound kind of, but it's not going to be the same as when this is just like super detuned like this. So I recommend you try that. Try your second oscillator like a lot quieter than the first one, but then 1 semitone up, or you can even do 1 semitone down, and you're gonna get this really dissonant, very evil sort of sound. And then that's just going through a bit of echo and some reverb. You can hear that, giving it some space. We have some drum bus to make this a bit fatter, and then finally I have this auto pan, just making it sound like it's being sidechained to the kick. And that is it for the melody. And then the last thing we have down here is the kick, which is 2 layers. We have our kick and our rumble. So for the kick, it's just the dry sample. But then to fatten it up, you can see I'm actually using some multiband distortion here. So here's without this. And then with it. So you can hear the beauty of the multiband distortion is that it's really still that same kick that you were hearing, only now it's just a lot fatter in the mid-range and high-end, but we're still preserving the low end. The low end isn't getting processed at all. You can see here, yeah, the EQ3, there's no processing on that, and then it's just this overdrive on the mid-range and highs. So yeah, I recommend you try this. It's a really great way to fatten up your kick, because you get the same thing you would get if you just dropped like drum bus on the whole kick. But this way, again, we're still keeping the low end intact. So it's still that same thing that you were getting just with the dry sample. But we just have kind of a boost of fatness in the mid-range and in the highs. And then the rumble sounds like this, and it's being made by taking that same kick, and then we're just playing straight 16 notes, and then it's going through some reverb, and this amp, which you can hear, gives it the rumble, and then we just have a low pass filter, which is taking just the rumble. And you'll notice with this style, you're gonna actually low pass it a bit higher. Like if this was a more main room techno track, you would probably low pass it there. But here, we want to let through a little bit more of that like kind of grungy texture. So that works really well for that. And then we just have a compressor side chaining it to the main kick. And then on the groove of those, all we have is just a bit of EQ, just cutting out at 21 hertz, because you can't really hear anything lower than 20 hertz. However, you can feel it. If you make, especially with like a really hard techno track like this, you know, if you have all those rumbling low frequencies below 20 hertz, you're not going to hear them like when you listen to it in your car or in the studio. But when you play it in the club or at a rave, where they have proper subwoofers and everything is like the low end's really pumping, you're gonna get like some weird rumbling frequencies where like you're not really gonna hear it, but you're gonna feel it, and it's gonna just feel really weird. Like when your track comes on, there's gonna be like some weird problems in the low end, but then when they play the next track after it, all of a sudden it's gonna be fine. So you gotta make sure you clean that up. I just have that there. A lot of people do this in mastering as well. And yeah, that is it for the kick. And that is also going to be it for this video, guys. So, I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you to everybody who goes and grabs a sample pack. This really helps to support me and keep me going, as I don't make a whole lot just off of YouTube videos. But with these sample packs and different things like this, I'm able to keep going and keep bringing you guys new videos every single day. So yeah, thank you so much everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.